Rachel Carson never intended to write a book on pesticides. She had read field reports about their negative effects on wildlife and believed chemical companies were using misinformation to make their products appear safer, and public officials were far too accepting. She wrote media outlets asking for investigative reports on pesticides, but Reader's Digest and the Washington Post turned her down. When she received a disturbing letter about birds dying after chemical sprays in Cape Cod, she reached out to the editor of the New Yorker and asked if he would be willing to write an article. He responded saying he would not write the article, but he thought that she should. The more she investigated, the more evidence she compiled. The article turned into a book that would become one of the most important pieces of literature of our time, spurring an environmental movement across the globe. Carson graduated Pennsylvania College and received her master's degree in zoology. She outscored all the other applicants on the civil science exam and became the second woman to work at the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries. She was hired as a junior marine biologist and worked her way up to editor-in-chief for all publications for the Fish and Wildlife Service. Her first book started as an essay for the Bureau. The head of her department told her the world of waters was too good to be a government brochure. It was published in the Atlantic and later expanded. Her second book was featured in the New Yorker and spent 86 weeks as a New York Times bestseller. She published her third book in 1955 and was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1960. Carson started writing Silent Spring in 1958. It was the golden age of capitalism. Industry and babies were booming. Much of the economic growth spurred from government spending. Chemical weapons intended for war were altered to make commercial pesticides to dominate and eradicate pests. Americans jumped at the chance to try new, inexpensive chemicals with little to no knowledge of their potency. The federal government even oversaw mass spraying campaigns to rid the land of dangerous ants, moths, worms, and beetles. The results were catastrophic to wildlife. Most of those campaigns resulted in an increase of the targeted pests. By the time Silent Spring was published, Carson was dying of breast cancer. She knew the book would be scrutinized, so she prepared it like a lawyer's brief, with 55 pages of notes and a list of experts who agreed with her. Chemical companies spent millions trying to discredit her. The Monsanto Chemical Company published 5,000 flyers of a parody titled The Desolate Year, where insects took over the earth. But the message of Silent Springs did not remain silent. The discussion moved from whether pesticides were dangerous to which ones. President Kennedy ordered a science advisory committee to investigate her research. Their findings validated her work and made pesticides a national issue. The book led to a reversal in national pesticide policy and marked the first time industry was regulated in order to protect the environment. The result was a ban on DDT for agricultural uses, policy changes, and safer overall pesticide use. Pesticide use on American crops tripled from 1960 to 1980. As the chemicals Carson wrote about were banned, new products flooded the markets and prices dropped. As insecticide usage declined, herbicide application exploded. Farmers stopped tilling, but compensated by dousing their fields with herbicides. In 1996, herbicide-tolerant crops were introduced, and farmers applied even more chemicals. By 2008, the majority of soybean, corn, and cotton crops were planted using HT seeds. Herbicide uses increased once again. Despite all these increases, there have been improvements. The biggest advancements have been in reducing toxicity and persistence levels. These levels decreased significantly after the ban of DDT, toxaphene, and aldrin, the eradication of the boll weevil, and the introduction of genetically engineered seeds. Also glyphosate. But glyphosate resistance is a growing concern along with other environmental risks. Carson's warned about this. Synthetic chemicals have permeated the air, water, and soil and are affecting nature. Our technological advances with lack of comprehensive ecological research have consequences. She warned chemicals used back then would persist in the environment for 50 to 100 years. 60 years later, science agrees. Researchers from the University of Sussex proved chemicals applied to agricultural crops harm the pollinators who feed on them. The same study found bees in urban environments were also exposed to dangerous levels of toxins. Chemicals banned decades ago are still found in wildlife today. A 5-year study of roachfish established DDT released 40 years ago still persisted in the sediment. Even after 20 years of cleanup efforts, DDT remained in the river bottom and could travel up the food chain. The study only examined fish, but assessed that DDT would also affect local birds and wildlife feeding on those fish. Chemical compounds have been linked to many health issues, including cancer, obesity, liver, gut, and metabolic issues. Researchers studying DDT and its metabolite found they were probable factors in growing obesity rates of rodents, primates, and humans over the last 30 years. Humans were found particularly vulnerable in the developmental stage from gestation to 10 years of age. The public is still unaware of many of the ways it exposes nature to hazardous chemicals. A study of pollinator plants purchased from garden centers found them riddled with multiple pesticides at levels harmful to pollinators. But the compounds weren't just found on the plants. They were part of them. The chemicals had grown into the leaves, plant tissues, and nectar. Scientists have found a significant correlation between bee viruses and fungicides. When combined with neonicotinoids, fungicides can be up to 1,000 times more toxic to pollinators. Scientists are only beginning to understand how sublethal exposures to various toxins work when combined with other chemicals. Gut infections, viruses, and immunosuppression are 3 ways organisms seem to be affected. Synthetic chemicals do have a negative effect on the environment, but there is still little being done to inform the public about their usage or associated risks. There is still a significant lack of research on how chemicals affect ecology, how the mixtures they make biomagnify, or how issues seen in insects, rodents, and bacteria will affect wildlife and humans in the years to come. Long-term exposure studies are critical. Thank you.